know me and you know my quilting, you know that I love fabric, all fabric, but particularly print fabrics. I love unique prints. I love blender prints. I honestly rarely use solids unless it's as a background. And one of my favorite ways to use prints is to fussy cut them. And if you don't know, fussy cutting is when you strategically cut your print fabrics to feature a certain part, to showcase your favorite element of the print. And it just brings an extra added surprise to your quilts. So you can use fussy cutting to pattern match so that it looks like your patterns line up seamlessly, like they're all just one piece of fabric. You can use fussy cutting to pattern match two different shades of the same print or two different colors of the same print so that it looks like your print changes color halfway through. And I'll put up an example of where I did that here. And you can use fussy cutting to pick out the special pictures in your print and make them shine. So here we've got some tulip pink otters, and they've been fussy cut so that they appear in these rectangles, all centered and beautiful, and you don't know what the rest of that print looked like. And the block is clearly telling a story about some otters. And we've got this block here where I've cut out these little tiny astronauts who are now floating in space full of stars and diamonds. We've got some seagulls, some clearly French water birds of some sort, and they are featured in this block in different positions, cut out to tell a little story. So this is a really great way not only to feature your favorite parts of a fabric print, but also employ more storytelling in your quilts. So it's a really fun technique. There are so many ways to use fussy cutting. You can change the direction of stripes from what it is originally intended in the print. You can change geometry to look a lot different. And you can use it in half square triangles. You can use it in flying geese. You can use it in every single shape. But today we're just gonna do a basic primer on fussy cutting. We're just gonna cut some certain sized squares. Squares, even sides, easy peasy. And I'm gonna show you how to center the pieces that you want to showcase in your fussy cutting. How I learned to fussy cut is from the Fussy Cut Sampler. So this is a book by Nicole Ramirez and Elizabeth Wu. And when this book was first published, they did a big quilt along. They have 48 different blocks that have 48 different little techniques and tips to help you fussy cut. And they did a big quilt along where we were making 4 blocks every week from this book for 12 weeks. And this was the only quilt along I have ever kept up with every single block on time, posted them up. I got so much out of this book. So if you love this technique and you want to learn more ways to incorporate it into your quilting, highly recommend. But today we're keeping it simple. So let's get going. Okay, so I went ahead and dug my rotating cutting mat out of hiding. It was hiding under some fabric, but I went and dragged it out because it's actually a really nice thing to have when you are fussy cutting, because you're gonna have to cut the top edges, and then you're gonna have to cut 2 edges, and then you're gonna have to cut the other 2, especially when you're making a square. So it's nice to be able to rotate and not move things away when you're precision cutting something, when you are strategically cutting something. So I drug that out. I've also got I use a Creative Grids 6.5 inch ruler. I like this because I find these labels really easy to see. I've got my 1/2 inch measurements over here, and I've got my inch measurements over here. Easy breezy. Another good idea, another good thing to have is a chalk pencil for dark prints or a friction pen for lighter prints, and some scissors, depending on what method you use to fussy cut. So there are basically 2 schools of thought, as far as I'm concerned, about fussy cutting. which is, if you've got your piece of fabric here, one way to do this is to find the piece you want to fussy cut. I want to feature this one in a square, we'll say. And you can mark the square that you are going to be cutting with your pen or your marking tool, and then cut it out using your scissors. And this is going to leave kind of a Swiss cheese sort of look to your fabric. Some people don't like that. I am one of those people. I don't like pulling out a fabric scrap that I have already cut pieces from and then finding that instead of, fat eighth of fabric, I have a Swiss cheese of fabric where I might not be able to get the size of piece that I need for the project that I'm actually working on. So I like to do the other method, which is measuring where I want to cut and then cutting an entire strip that is that size. So if I just wanted a 4-inch square around this butterfly, let's say, I would cut a 4-inch strip alongside that butterfly that includes that butterfly, and then cut down the pieces from there. And then I can cut the rest of the strip in 4-inch pieces for my scrap pile if I want. And then I have this whole piece of fabric untouched by scissors. And that's just the way I prefer to do it. Sometimes if it's a teeny tiny little piece, having scissors seems like the most economical way to remove a piece from there. So those are kind of the two ways of doing it that I thought of. So if you want to do it the latter way, you're also going to need your longer ruler, your longer straight edge, and a rotary. And then I also have nearby a marker, and then I have some washi tape. And this is when you're fussy cutting, if you want to be able to see the area that you're cutting, it can help to frame it by marking it directly on your ruler, which I can do with a dry erase marker. The downside of that is it wipes right off. And then sometimes those little marker bits can get on your fabric. Or you can use a wet erase marker, which I don't have up here right now, but that you can just wipe off with water. And that's nice too. But if you don't want to use marker because you don't want to get little bits and pieces of ink all over your fabric, you can also use washi tape to mark the edge on your ruler of the outside measurements that you're going for. So we're going to keep that on hand depending on the size that we're cutting today. And I'm actually going to cut for 2 projects today. The first fabric I'm going to cut is the butterflies, you guessed it. And this I'm going to use for a knuffle quilt, which uses 5-inch pieces. So I already know that I want to cut 5-inch pieces from this fabric, 5-inch squares. So I can mark on my ruler with washi tape the 5-inch square mark, and then that's going to help me better see how to frame the butterflies and which butterflies are going to be best featured in a 5-inch square. Because when I look at this fabric, I might get to a butterfly like this and see that in a 5-inch square, some of my butterfly is going to get cut off. So maybe that's not the best butterfly to feature on a 5-inch square. So I'm going to want to stick with all these other guys on here. The other project I'm going to work on today and fussy cut some pieces for is for a quilt as you go, a couple of quilt as you go pillows that have these juice boxes in the center of log cabins. And because I'm doing quilt as you go, the size is flexible. It doesn't matter what size I cut, so I can base the size that I cut around the size of the things that I want to feature, which are these juice boxes. So let's start there with how large I need to cut to feature these juice boxes. So I'm going to start with this blue colorway of this fabric, which is from Juicy, which is a Ruby Star Society collection by Melody Miller. She is so good at these cute juice boxes. So this is a Juicy print, And I'm gonna start with this blue because I thought it would be the easiest to see on camera, especially with the ruler on top of it. So we'll see if that works. So I'm gonna start on this side of my ruler because it's really easy for me to see the 1/4 inch mark because it's sort of highlighted on this ruler by the nonstick stuff on the back. And I'm gonna make sure that the top corner of my print, which is the juice box, that's what I wanna feature, the top corner is gonna be within that 1/4 inch mark because the 1/4 inch mark is going to be your seam allowance. You have to account for your seam allowance when you're fussy cutting to make sure that the whole image that you want to feature, the whole picture, is going to be seen in the piece that you cut. So I'm going to put the 1/4 inch mark here to see how small I could possibly make. What's the minimum size that this square would need to be? And I'm going to go with a square just to keep it simple. Obviously, this could be a rectangular shape and still feature this because it's kind of a rectangular juice box, but we're gonna make it a square. So the longest side, it doesn't quite make it to 3 1/4 inches because if I go to 3 1/4 inches, the bottom of the juice box is gonna be within my seam allowance. So I could make it 3 1/2 inches on the longest side and that would fit within the square. So if I go over here, I could mark 3 1/2 inches all the way around and center my piece in the middle, and that square would contain the whole juice box. If I wanted one of these juice boxes that has the straw, we'll see if 3 1/2 inches would work. Unfortunately, if I wanted to do 3 1/2 inches, then the straw image is not gonna quite fit because my 1/4 inch seam all the way around is at 3 1/4 inches, and this would all fit. And then over here, you can see that just the corner of the straw would be within the seam allowance, so you wouldn't see it. The rest of the image would fit, but if I want to get those straws in there, I would have to make this probably a 4 inch square, or at least 3 3/4 inch square. But for the rest of the juice boxes, we are looking at a great 3 1/2 inch motif there. So I could mark that with my washi tape, just to be able to better see it by making sure that I am marking out 3 1/2 inch framed piece. Just gonna help me sort of see how it's gonna look in the final block. So when I cut this, and I'm gonna go press it, and when I center it, I'm gonna wanna center it at the middle of 3 1/2 inches. So 1 3/4 inches, I want to be whatever I want in the very center of that fussy cut piece. We're all pressed, and because these are not in even rows, they're just a little bit offset, I am gonna use the Swiss cheese method on this one. This is because if I cut off a row that's gonna give me a 3 1/2 inch juice box, I am actually gonna be making this whole other row unusable. So I could only use this row of juice boxes and this row of juice boxes, and I want to be able to pick and choose ones from each of the rows. So I'm going to use the Swiss cheese method here. So I'll start with this little orange right here. So I'm going to have to decide what I think is the center, what's going to make the most sense to be the center of this piece, and put that at 1 3/4. And I think on this one, it's just gonna help to see it framed. I think that I'm gonna eyeball what looks the most centered to me by using my little frame that I made out of washi tape and then the top edge of my ruler. And 1 3/4 is right here. That seems like a reasonable place to put the center. That would mean, and let me make sure, I have about 3/4 of an inch on this side, and I have about more than 3/4 of an inch on this side. So I'm gonna scoot it just a little over. Now I have about the same distance on the sides. I have about 1/4 inch here and a 1/2 inch here. So we'll move that up a little too, which puts 1 3/4 in the main box of this juice carton. That makes sense to me. So now I'm going to use this, my chalk pen or white chalk pencil, to draw my 3.5 inch box here. And I'm going to flip her over. Line up that chalk line I just made. It's hard to see. Make sure that's even. And we're going to do my chalk line here. Fantastic. Now before I cut this out, I would probably go and pick out all the other ones I want to do to make sure that I am cool with chopping off all of the surrounding juice boxes. This is not the most efficient method of cutting fabric. Fussy cutting is not efficient. Let's just get that out of the way right now. If efficiently making use of your fabric is your goal, this is not the technique for you. This is specifically to strategically cut things to feature certain parts of the fabric. So you're going to need more fabric than your pattern requires because you're not cutting it efficiently. Because by cutting this one out, you're making it so you cannot cut the whole shape of this out. If you want just one fussy cut block and then you don't mind if this part is not fussy cut, then maybe that's going to work for you just fine. But I want to make sure that I have all of the prints that I want to get before I start cutting into this one, so I can trace this and trace the other ones and make sure that I've got plenty of space around them so that I'm not cutting off anything else that I want. And then we're just going to use our fabric scissors to cut that little shape out. All right, you can see that I have cut out my cute little juice box and that I have absolutely Swiss cheesed the rest of this fabric. But I've actually cut it really carefully. I cut it as carefully as I could to make sure that I leave as much of the fabric intact as possible for pieces that I can use not as whole juice boxes. So I don't like finding Swiss cheese in my stash, so I will already be cutting out pieces of this that maybe don't need to be fussy cut in my most commonly used scrap sizes. So I'm going to cut out any 2.5 inch pieces that I can to use in scrap quilts, or even, you know, this cherry here, or this daisy, or this orange over here, or these cherries would be really cute fussy cut elements in a smaller project. Even though they don't use the whole juice box, they'll still use that whole element. So this square that I have traced right here, I'm gonna come in with my scissors through the selvage so that I don't cut up this orange, so I don't cut up this lemon, so I don't cut up this cherry, and I'm leaving as many bits of the fabric uncut as possible, but I'm still getting my little piece out of there. So I've really Swiss cheesed it. We'll see what I can get. But look at all of the cute fussy cut pieces I did manage to get. I've got these beautifully centered, individual, strategically cut fussy cut juice boxes now that I can put as the center of a log cabin square so that it's going to be absolutely featured and appreciated as the art that it is. All right, now it's time to set my Swiss cheese aside and do the method that I favor, which is to cut a row of fabric, a full row, so that it's a little more efficient, I think, and so that I can store my scraps without being driven crazy. So I'm going to ignore these butterflies for now because remember, out of this one, I want 5-inch squares. So it doesn't matter how large each butterfly is, so long as it fits into a 5-inch square. And then I can just center it in the 5-inch square. And we already saw that this one is a little bigger than a 5-inch square, so I'm just going to save it for a different project, and I'm going to cut the other rows. So I'm going to start, let's see, do I have 5 inches of this at the bottom? In a 5-inch square, I would want the center of these butterflies to hit at 2.5 inches. Some of them do that. I think enough of them do that I could cut that strip right there and get a 5-inch square. That's all I'm looking at, because with some of these, they're a little high up on the print. And if I really wanted to center it, or I'm sorry, some of them are a little low down on the print. And if I really wanted to center it, then I wouldn't have enough to make 5 inches down here. So that's what I'm looking at. I'm just looking to make sure that I can get the maximum amount of butterflies from a 5-inch strip. So I can there. So I'm just gonna cut this whole strip of fabric at 5 inches. Then I can move my washi tape that I just had at 3.5 inches, can move it down to the 5-inch mark to help me better see where these are framed. If you can just sort of eyeball this from the lines on your ruler and not get them all confused, then by all means, don't use the washi tape or a marker. But I'm just gonna do it because it helps me see better with emphasis where the 5-inch line is. So the 5-inch line is just inside where I've put the washi tape so I can sort of see it like a picture frame. So unlike with the Swiss cheese method, this is already cut to 5 inches. So you know it's already gonna be 5 inches long. So easy breezy, I just need to make sure that it's 5 inches wide. And butterflies are such a great motif to cut this way because all I have to do is make sure that the center there is at 2.5 inches because that's the halfway point. And I can just center that body there and I know it's gonna be nice and symmetrical and centered. So that's my 2.5 inch line right there, lined up on that butterfly's body. Make sure it's straight. Flip it over. Boom. I have a 5-inch square with that butterfly as centered as it can be. Remember, I cut it off from the bottom, so up and down, it's a little less than centered. But if you look right there, it's pretty centered. That's our butterfly. That's the center of our 5-inch square block. Beautiful. Easy breezy. All right, so we've done the basics. I hope that now you have enough information that you can incorporate some fussy cuts into your projects. We've got the 5-inch squares. We've got the, what were these, 3.5-inch squares, perfectly centered, framed like a little picture. They're gonna be great. So just tell me, does this give you feelings of intense anxiety? Yeah, as it does for me. So I'm gonna go make that into some nice square scraps right now.